Hi, Andrea. Thank you so much for getting on the call with me today. I am so excited. We met in person a couple of weeks ago. You have been a part of our community for a year now, close to a year.
Just about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You joined our advocacy program and we had an event in Dallas and I got to hear your incredible, amazing story. And now you are willing to share that story with the world. So I want to thank you so much. And so I want you to give your diagnosis in a minute. But before you go into your story, I want to start with you, who you are, who you were before your cancer diagnosis. But you were diagnosed with a rare form or a more uncommon form of brain cancer. So, what specifically was the name of your diagnosis?
I was diagnosed with a grade 3 oligodendroglioma. Mouthful,
That,
right?
how long did it take you to know how to say that?
Definitely more than 5 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. And not to mention the shock of just getting that diagnosis. So,
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about Andrea before this diagnosis.
Well, the past several years have been pretty tumultuous. I, in 2022, moved to Maine from Truckee, California, across the country, very crazy, with my husband. And I have been in the nutrition world for a very long time,
Mm,
uh, since 2010.
okay.
And not necessarily cancer focused, but just general health, nutrition, wellness. Um, and In Truckee, I had a small private practice, but then we moved across the country and I had to put that on hold a little bit. And right before we left Truckee, I had gotten my certification as an oncology nutrition consultant.
Wow.
And it was really a wonderful thing.
True.
I loved the program. I did it with the Oncology Nutrition
Yeah.
Institute.
Oh, and Jess Higgins. Oh,
Yes,
wow. Yeah.
exactly.
Amazing.
And so I finished that right before we moved across the country. And I was doing some other sort of practitioner things in that year of 2022. And so I sort of put my practice on hold for a little bit while we moved. Um, and I mean, to be honest, we were exploring a new city and it was fun. And we got to eat out a little bit more. And by the end of 2022, I knew that I really wanted to get back to some of the habits I had had while I was in Truckee.
Hmm. Health
And
habits, the lifestyle. Yeah.
yeah, cooking more and, going to fewer restaurants. I love restaurants. I used to work in a past life in the wine industry, so I love restaurants, but I was ready to get back to my good
Yeah.
habits. And that is what led me on this journey.
All
Um,
right. So let's talk about your diagnosis.
Well, so what happened is in February of 2023, I decided to get a Prenuvo full body MRI scan. And partially just to get back on track, but I was just about to turn 44. And when my mom was 44, she had breast cancer.
Hmm.
And this was on my mind. We also had a close family friend, unfortunately, about my age, passed from colon cancer in 2020.
Hmm.
And I always felt like, gosh, she's so young,
Yeah.
so young.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to get this Prenuvo scan. I had learned about it through my nutrition background. And I had a trip to San Francisco Bay Area and thought, this is the perfect opportunity. Let's get it done. So I went in 6:30 a.m. and I was like waiting there in the dark before anybody got there. And I got my scan And it was a really lovely thing. It was the first scan I'd ever had in my life. I've never had any broken bones, any really severe illnesses. I haven't even had a cavity.
Oh, wow.
And so I was like, great, this will be just a great exploration of my health. And when I got out of the scan, the radiologist asked me, in your intake form, you said that you lost your sense of smell. Tell me more about that. Well, I had had COVID right before we left Truckee, and I lost my sense of smell. And I had done so many things as a nutritionist. I'm adding in the zinc and all the supplements I could think of to get it back, and it just wouldn't come back. So I told him the story, didn't think any more of it. But it was a hint of what was to come. And I went off to work and did my thing. And I got home at 9:00 at night that night, or back to the hotel by myself. And I had a couple of missed calls from Prenuvo. And the messages were, there is something urgent and concerning in your scan.
Wow.
We need to speak with you immediately.
Wow.
So I called, no one to talk to. And I didn't sleep much that night.
Yeah. And I'm sure when you left Prenuvo, they told you it would be a couple of weeks.
15, yeah, they're like, 2 weeks, 15 days, something like that. And so it was like not on my radar that I would get a call from them immediately. And so I arranged to speak to the nurse practitioner who gives the results for the next day. I went back to my hotel early, prepared myself, got on the call with the nurse practitioner, and they start at the top of the body. They said, you have a 2.3 by 2.4 centimeter mass in the right temporal lobe of your brain.
Wow.
I mean, wow. That is crazy. I had no symptoms.
And you're probably thinking breast cancer because of your mom.
Exactly. I was totally thinking maybe it's, maybe I have, once I knew that there was something wrong, something in my brain just didn't compute.
Yeah.
And so, we went through the rest of the body, and, the Prenuvo scans are amazing. You learn so much about your body. And, I learned things like I have a little nodule on my thyroid that ultimately I had it scanned and they couldn't find it. So Prenuvo is amazing.
Yeah.
But it discovered a tumor I had no idea was there. And now that I think about it, oh my goodness, how grateful am I that I had this scan when I did, before I had any symptoms whatsoever.
Yeah.
Most people with brain cancer, they find out because they have a seizure. And if you have a seizure while driving, I mean, we have a family friend who had a seizure while driving because of a glioblastoma, and she went onto the sidewalk with her car.
That's not good. That's not good. And you do hear those stories a lot. Yeah. And I cannot imagine how hard it would have been to be getting that call and you're not there with your partner, processing alone in a hotel. Yeah. How was that?
Yeah. It was intense. Of course, my husband was in the loop. I, had called him immediately after I had this conversation. But yeah, it was a shock. And my sister lives in San Francisco. I was not staying with her. I was staying in a hotel. And I was able to share this news with her later that weekend. But that first night that I had this news, I did not sleep. That's for sure. But I also sort of got this sense of gratitude.
Wow.
Throughout that. I knew from my experiences working with people with cancer that it can change your life.
Mm.
And it's not always for the worst. I was confident that I had the skills as a nutritionist and that I had the connections that would help get me through this. So I wasn't really scared of dying or of the illness process. And I knew it would make me make changes to my life and my health that would be good for me.
Wow. Thankfully for that background, because that would be a very hard leap to get to, even in the first week, let alone the first night.
Yeah.
So talk to me about after. So what happened after you got the diagnosis? I'm assuming next steps were an appointment with an oncologist. Kind of what took place from there?
Well, I went back to Maine and I started trying to wade through the medical system. Now, because we had just moved there, I didn't have a doctor. I had sort of tried to get a doctor earlier that summer to, establish care, just to have a doctor. And I was told at that point that everybody's full. We don't have openings for new patients. And so I just sort of let that go
For
because I
that was
wasn't
for your
ill. That was prior to the scan, like the prior.
Okay.
So when I came home with this news that I had a brain tumor, I had to self-refer myself into the main medical system, try and get in to see the neurosurgeon there. And I tried to get an appointment with a PCP just so I could order the extensive blood work that I knew that I wanted because of my background in nutrition.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they did ultimately assign me to a doctor in Maine, a PCP. They wouldn't let me make an appointment with her. And so I had 3 appointments with nurse practitioners, which were great and they were helpful, but not a doctor.
Right.
And the neurosurgeon there sat on my scans for 3 weeks, didn't look at them. And then when he finally did, he said, "You need another scan." In that 3 weeks that it took him to look at those scans, one of my mentors, Allison Gannett, what a great mentor to have for someone who's a brain tumor, suggested that I look into going to Barrow Neurological in Phoenix and having surgery with Dr. Kris Smith, who is stellar.
Amazing human and amazing neurosurgeon.
Yes. And so I pretty much made up my mind to go to Arizona for surgery. And I scheduled my surgery for April 5th, 2023. So about just over 2 months since I had gotten my scan results.
And your insurance covered Barrows?
They did.
Nice.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes. Yeah. Thank God.
We're able to get into him so quickly. I know that he has a huge waiting list.
He does. And they were great. I flew out with my husband a few days before, and we got to see Phoenix and do a little bit of sightseeing and try and relax and decompress before surgery. And then the day before surgery, we had all of the pre-op appointments. My parents flew in from Idaho, so I had loved ones around me. Yeah. And my appointment with Dr. Smith was actually really interesting that day before. Early on, in that day, I had another MRI scan. And I get my scans without gadolinium. And so he looked at my scan and he said, "Are you sure that you have not had any seizures? Because your hippocampus is being compressed in half. And that causes seizures." Oh my goodness. Thank God I had not had one, because that would have been the next thing to happen to me.
Wow. So I'm curious, two questions. One, after your diagnosis, did you notice symptoms? Because oftentimes, like, we don't notice, and then, or now that we know, we start to think little things are symptoms. Did you notice anything after your diagnosis?
Just a slight pressure behind my right eye, like just ever so slight, because my tumor was right behind the optical nerve. And it was just very slight. And after surgery, that went away. But it wasn't anything that I would have thought of
Yeah.
beforehand.
Yeah. And then in terms of not getting any of the gadolinium, is that, so that's a request that you knew to make. And did you get any pushback from it? And if you can just talk a little bit about the challenges with it and the challenges with requesting the scans without it.
Absolutely. From Dr. Smith, I have gotten no pushback on that. From the doctor in Maine who wanted me to get another MRI, he specifically requested with gadolinium, and I refused it. And it took him a week. And he ultimately said, I'm not going to see you unless you do this.
Oh, okay.
So I talked to the patient liaison and said, listen, this is a health decision I've made for myself. And if he doesn't want to see me because of that, then he's not the right doctor for me.
Okay.
And yeah, it was definitely one of those moments where I was like, well, maybe I should just do it. Maybe I should. But then I got to thinking about it of, if he doesn't respect this decision that I've made about this, how is he going to respect other health decisions that I make for myself?
Probably not. He probably won't.
Exactly.
Yeah, right answer. And you knew that not having the gadolinium was not going to change their ability to be able to read the scans.
My tumor was so clear as day on the Prenuvo scan. I mean, clear margins, like it you could see it. It was like day glow, even though there was no contrast. So I was not concerned. Had it been a different type of tumor, like an astrocytoma or something that was more interwoven into brain tissue,
Yeah.
then maybe I would have felt a little differently. But it was very obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And so my thought in making that decision for myself was, okay, I know brain cancers are often caused by toxins. And I also know from some genetics testing I've done that I have poor detox genes. So I do not want to compromise, my ability to recover from this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that was the decision I made.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, so you had the surgery, and was it just surgery through Dr. Smith?
It was. I went in at like 10:30 in the morning. This is the first surgery of my life. Go big or go home, right? So I went in at like 10:30. I asked him, how long is this going to take? He's like, oh, it'll take like 3 or 4 hours. Okay. They put me under. I don't even remember them rolling me out of the waiting room into the surgery room. Remember none of it. And then all of a sudden I wake up and I'm being rolled into the ICU for recovery. And I see Dr. Smith and I'm like, what time is it? He said, it's 5:00. I said, I thought you said it's only going to take 3 or 4 hours. And he was like, well, your brain is working well.
Good. As a doctor, that's probably what you want to know. Can they talk? Did I hear? Are they thinking? Clarity? He was like right on.
Exactly. And so they put me into recovery, and evidently the reason why it took so long is they had some computer issues and they wanted to make sure the software was working properly before they opened me up. So thank you for doing that. It's okay that it took longer.
You were peacefully sleeping anyways.
Yeah. And so I, recovered in the ICU, and that was an interesting experience as well. I am keto.
Mm.
And so I told everyone no glucose in my saline bags. I want a keto menu. Well, they tried to feed me red jello as part of their clear liquids
Just
diet.
give me some of
I'm
the eating too. Right.
right.
Good,
I'm
good
not going
red
to eat
dye
that.
and glucose. I love it.
Yeah. No, I mean, even if it was artificial sweetener, I would not be eating that. And so I just told them, listen, I want my bone broth. I had brought my own bone broth. So if
Love it.
anyone is ever concerned, you can bring your own food to the hospital.
Hmm.
It's probably advisable.
And bone broth, how nourishing that is, the warmth of it. And you get your electrolytes, put some good Celtic salt or pink Himalayan salt in there, and you get the good, protein and collagen and amino acids and fatty acids. I mean, so good for recovery.
Yeah. Yeah. It was great. And it also got me out of some anti nausea medicine that they tried to give me.
Mm.
They wanted to give me like Pepsid AC or one of those. And I said, no, I'm A, not nauseous. B, I'm not taking that. Please just give me my bone broth.
Yeah.
And it was fine.
Love it, love it, love it. And so help me understand. Does Barrows have their own hospital, or they're using or he does his surgeries at a hospital in Arizona?
Barrows is located within the Dignity Health system at St. Joseph's Hospital.
Okay,
So
so
generally,
St. Joseph. So it's their menus, because I know that Dr. Smith himself really advertises and believes in a ketogenic diet, especially for people with brain cancers, because they're highly, highly, highly uh, glycogenic. They're like glucose hogs.
yes, they do like the glucose. And the second that I found out that I had a brain tumor, we didn't know if it was benign or malignant. We had no
Okay.
idea. My background says if it were to be brain cancer, immediately what you should do is get on a ketogenic
Right.
diet. So I had been on a ketogenic diet since February
Okay.
before my
And you got
surgery.
the diagnosis essentially.
The diagnosis of the tumor, not the pathology that told me what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I went into surgery, I had spent a couple of months already on the ketogenic diet. So my ketones were up. I fasted before surgery to make sure that they were even as, higher than
That's
normal.
what I
And
was what was your prep for the surgery? Because we often don't know there's a lot of things we can do to prep for surgery.
yes, my surgery is on Wednesday and I fasted from Monday night on. They tell you to fast from usually the night before on because they don't want anything in your stomach while you're having surgery, which is very commonplace. But I extended that an extra day. And I had done a lot of fasting prior, um, knowing that that would help my labs, that would help me produce ketones, lower my blood sugar. And so fasting that day, extra day, like it was really no problem.
Yeah.
It was easy.
Yeah, and overall too, just aiding in recovery, because when your liver doesn't have to focus on processing food, it can focus on clearing out all those toxins. And so the longer break that we give it, the better room we leave for it to be able to, be a part of the process.
Absolutely. Yeah. And after the surgery, I felt pretty good. I was awake. I was thinking properly. My brain was clear. I wasn't fuzzy. I wasn't even on a lot of painkillers or anything. A little bit.
Yeah,
But
imagine.
I was quickly moving towards more over the counter style pain meds than the pharmaceutical grade.
Yeah.
And 24 hours after I got out of surgery, I was released from the hospital.
Wow. Out of ICU and
Yep, they released me directly out of the ICU, and I could go back to our Airbnb.
Very nice. Very nice. And what did your recovery process look like from there? And then was there alternative treatments that were recommended, radiation or chemo or anything of that nature?
So, with brain tumors, they don't do biopsies. So as I said, we didn't know what it was. I had to wait 2 weeks to get the pathology back. When we got the pathology back, we had a meeting. I was already back in Maine, and we had a telemedicine visit with Dr. Smith for the pathology. And he told me it was a grade 3 oligodendroglioma. His words were something along the lines of, there were faster growing cells in there. So that is why they gave it the grade it was. And that is considered cancer. And the tumor board recommended that I get chemo and radiation because that's their toolbox. That's what they do.
Right.
But Dr. Smith is a very special flower.
He is.
He and I agree on exactly how to work with cancers and brain cancers if possible. And that is with the metabolic diet. And so he said, let's just keep doing your ketogenic diet and we'll set chemo and radiation on the shelf for now. If you ever need it in the future, then it's there for you, but you don't need it now. I got the whole tumor. He got the whole thing. So, okay. Now, right before I had surgery, I did have an appointment with a wonderful MAT-C doctor. And so I had just initiated some care to start working on my terrain, the soil that my cancer grew out of.
And for clarification, when we say MAT-C doctor, we're saying one of the metabolic approach to cancer doctors who have gone through the education course at Metabolic Training Institute of Health as taught by Dr. Nasha Winters. So just to clarify there, we have some common terms. And you can go ahead and say who your doctor was, if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. Or is Dr. Duhan.
Oh, Dr.
Yes, he's out
of Seattle. Yes.
Yes.
Amazing.
So we started this process of doing extensive labs so that I could understand, what needed to be fixed in my terrain. And, when I got my pathology after surgery, we really started hammering in on fixing all of the things that had come up in those labs that did need to be fixed. And I spent the next several months working on that. And a lot of the issues that I had were around blood sugar and, maybe some inflammation. And to be honest, after a few months on keto, my labs looked like they came from a different person.
Wow. Yeah. Game changer.
Yeah.
It was that metabolic reset that you needed.
Yes. Yes. And I'm so grateful for that reset.
Yeah.
Because it means I'm a much healthier person now. I mean, I was healthy before. We all say that. But I proved it that I needed work by the differences between my labs, my pre-labs and my post-labs. And over the past year, I've just continued to work on it and continued to work on it. And it is sort of a labor of love, and you have to go monthly to get your labs done to track your progress and make sure that nothing's going awry. And I take quite a lot of supplements, but I'm not on any meds.
Wow.
Not even one.
Amazing. Amazing. And are you working with an advocate as well? Are you working with Allison or any of the other advocates?
So initially I did work with Allison. She's my mentor. So I thought, and she was really great for helping me prepare for surgery. As someone who's gone through several brain surgeries herself, mm-hmm. She knew exactly what I needed to do, like high dose melatonin beforehand and things like that.
Yeah.
That helped me. work on, and the instructions of, make sure there's no glucose in your saline, and make sure that you don't get a huge dose of steroids because that'll pump up your blood sugar.
Yeah.
That's not what you want. So she was really helpful in doing that. And, because of my background, it was almost like a continued mentoring relationship on that.
So amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And now are you working with anybody with your background? And you've also been through the advocacy course. You have all of this knowledge. So, applying that to yourself, and then sometimes just having somebody else that you can double check with. Do you have your people that you kind of work with and check in with?
I still work with Dr. Duhan. I am seeing him every couple of months now, now that I'm stable. And I consult with colleagues whenever I have a question, but honestly, things have been pretty stable.
Okay. That's awesome.
For the most part.
That is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And are you getting scans?
I have had a couple of scans. So after we went back to Maine, after surgery, the difficulty in seeing a doctor really scared me. And it became apparent that we needed to leave Maine.
Okay.
So 3 months after brain surgery, my husband and I moved to Arizona.
And you had only been in Maine?
A year, 15 months.
Wow.
We bought a house when we moved there. We sold the house when we left. We bought a new house in Arizona. And as we moved across the country, I drove myself across the country 3 months after brain surgery.
Wow.
And I credit the metabolic diet. It just allowed me to have the mental strength. I did have some nervous system dysregulation after that experience that I worked through with some other practitioners. I worked with an energy person. I worked with actually 2 energy people, and also just worked on meditation and just decompressing, because it was a lot right after brain surgery.
Stress and anxiety induced, or do you think it was post-surgery induced?
I don't think surgery had anything to do with it. I think it was just the pressure of moving, packing up all of our belongings, selling a house, and then arriving in a place that was 120 when we got here, and figuring out where we were going to live, and then, getting all of our stuff moved in. And we did it fast. We closed on our house in Maine on July 14th. And on August 15th, we closed on our new house in Phoenix.
Wow.
So it was bam.
Yeah.
So being that we were able to move to Phoenix, I now get to have my scans and my appointments in person with Dr. Smith.
Oh, that's so nice. Nice. He is truly, truly a blessing.
He really is. And so I had my 6-month post surgery scan in September. All clear, looked great. And then I just had my 1-year scan. And it was one of those situations where I was nervous going in, because I was just like, oh my gosh, so much has happened. What if? I go in there. He said, it looks exactly the same as the last one. It looks beautiful. Had you done the standard of care treatments, the chemo, the radiation, your brain would not look so good.
No.
And then he said, you are the poster child for what I want to do with a metabolic approach. Oh my gosh. It just brought tears to my eyes.
Yeah.
It's like, because this is hard work. And, but I know in my heart of all hearts that this is the way to go with my brain cancer, and that it's successful. And he can see it. I can see it. I look like a different person. I've lost quite a bit of weight and I look healthier. You know, it's people say it every time I post a video on my Facebook or my Instagram to let my friends, family, and followers know what's going on with me because I've been very open about my journey. They all say, "You look amazing." And I want people to know that you have the power to do this too.
Yeah. Yeah. And, from Dr. Smith's perspective, every day he is seeing too many patients with brain cancers. And he doesn't have the fortune to see so many people with outcomes like yours. And I imagine for him, if he could get everybody to adopt what you have adopted, it would make his job and his self-fulfilling, wanting to be a healer, just really be able to do that. He wants to heal everybody. And we've got to get this message out there. Brain tumors are, they can be extremely aggressive. And if we don't, the beauty in what you did was you did the surgery to remove it, but then you worked on the metabolic components to it that create, the dysfunction in metabolic functions is what created the tumor. And so now you're working on the metabolic functions to hopefully not go into this cancering process again, to where your body and your brain wants to create these tumors.
Absolutely. And brain tumors, they like to come back. Brain cancer has a 90% recurrence rate.
Yeah.
And that mentally for me was a really tough thing to think about.
Yeah. And how do you mentally and emotionally deal with this whole process? Because as you know, you've been working with individuals with cancer with your O&I background and training. Probably one of the most common things that we see and the hardest thing that we deal with when we're working with individuals with cancer is this fight or flight state. And when somebody goes into fight or flight, they're not thinking strategic, they're not thinking long-term, cognitive functions decline, lots of stress, lots of anxiety, and it's really hard to get people to even make changes to their sleep patterns, let alone changes to their diet. So you're very fortunate in having that knowledge going in, but it doesn't make it easier to process. So how have you dealt with that?
Well, I have definitely explored lots of meditation and lots of energy work. I also have been very adamant to myself, even saying it to myself in the mirror, you are safe. You are healthy. And I think reinforcing that in your psyche is really important. Bruce Lipton's book, absolutely, you are what you think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing is that I know that if something were to happen to me, I would see it on my labs very quickly. And I have the best team around me that I could find. And I know that if something ever did happen in the future, I would have support.
Yeah.
And it would be a situation that we would figure out a solution. So that gives me a lot of peace. Having the right team around you, a team that not just looks at what your tumor is and, the genetics of the tumor and, what sort of tumor centric treatments can we give this person, but someone who's looking at my entire body.
Yeah.
And keeping track of, the small changes, with a change in supplements or a change in stress or, there are things that impact labs, and keeping track of those things gives you peace of mind because you can start to see the patterns.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, you have your metabolic approach to cancer doctor, Dr. Duhan, you have your neurosurgeon, Dr. Kris Smith. What about your oncologist, GP?
I don't have an oncologist. I never got one because I'm not doing chemo or radiation, and there's no need
Yeah.
to have one at this time. Dr. Smith takes care of all of my scans and our appointments afterward. And I know that he has my back if I need it. So I don't have an oncologist.
Yeah.
I did recently get a naturopath here as my PCP, and she, for the first time, ordered my labs. I had been ordering, and I just recently started with her outside of Dr. Duhan. Dr. Duhan is in Washington, so he was unable to order my labs.
Yeah.
But
And
where there's a will, there is a way.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of the challenge is it does become expensive because a lot of things have to be done out of pocket. And so, when you can find a way to get it, the things that you need through insurance, and then to be able to have the doctors who can read that, and as well, just your own empowerment. And yes, you have a background in nutrition and you went to school for O&I, but you went to O&I and you learned how to read labs and do all of those things. But a lot of it is too just learning yourself.
Yeah, I have learned so much in a few months. How to get my fats up, for me. I'm on a very strict ketogenic diet. Brain cancer, because they are so glycolytic, I'm on a very, very low carb version. I actually call it super keto. I call it super keto because it makes me feel amazing. And I think it has superpowers, but it's also really, really, really different from internet keto that you see, meat and cheese fest, all of that. That is not the diet I am on. I am eating lots of fresh vegetables, moderate amounts of meat, and a ton of healthy fats. And figuring out recipes. I love eating out at restaurants, but I can't really do that very easily anymore. So I cook those things at home. I make Asian food. I make Italian food. I've found ways to make really delicious food that is better than what I can get in a restaurant.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure.
One day.
Yeah.
One day I'll have.
Curious, have you heard of the app Seed Scout?
I have.
Yeah.
I have.
I'm just going to throw a little plug out there for Seed Scout. I don't know who those guys are, but I love that app because it's an app where you can look locally and it actually rates restaurants in terms of organic. Do they use any seed oils? Can you get clean oils? It's really great. So when you're in those times where you're going to eat out, you have to eat out. You've got a lot of things going on. This app is incredibly helpful to be able to find good, clean restaurants. So plug for those guys for putting this together because I know it's got to be a lot of work.
Yes, and I hope it encourages more restaurants to go that direction. Having a past working in the wine industry, I used to work with lots of top restaurants, and I know that it's tough. I know there's tight margins, but please, please think about people's health.
Yeah. Well, a lot of them don't even know, when we had that event in Dallas a couple of weeks ago and we were trying to find a place to host the dinner that night. When most places that we called and we asked them if they had seed oils, they said, no, we don't use sesame seed, or, no, we don't put nuts in our oils. And I was like, okay. And we had to say, okay, we can't use that word, got to use the, processed canola oil. We have to spell it out specifically. And we had a really hard time finding a restaurant. But, it is what it is, and you do find them, and usually they're more expensive, but your health is worth the financial the financial resources. The other thing that I will say is I probably spend less on my groceries than most of my friends because I don't buy 90% of the stuff that they buy. I hosted a dinner party at my house a couple of weeks ago, and one of the girls said, "Oh, can I look at your pantry?" And I was like, "Okay, fine." And she goes, "You don't have any food in here." And I was like, but I didn't know what she meant at first because I've been living this lifestyle for so long. I thought for sure I do. I've got all my jars of like macadamia nuts and, all of these things. And I said, yeah, I do. And I've got my oils. And she was like, no, where's the boxes? Where's the jars? And I was like, oh, yeah, I save a lot of money on that.
A lot of money. And that is absolutely true. I mean, I've saved a lot of money on not having any of the processed food and also no alcohol.
Oh, yeah.
So, brain cancers, alcohol crosses the blood brain barrier. So, I have made the commitment to myself that alcohol's off the table, probably for the long haul.
And was that tough? You love wine.
I do love wine, but it was easier than you would imagine. I knew that alcohol wasn't always my best thing. Prior to discovering my tumor, if I had had a glass of wine at night, it would wake me up in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Or it would make me hot. I'd have like a histamine reaction to it. My body was sending me signals even as early as, fall of 2022, that alcohol wasn't really helping me. And so I almost gave it up then. Like
Yeah.
I spent the month of that November, no alcohol. So it was something for me that was not that difficult. I think the hard thing for people is generally, what do you do socially when you can't drink? You still want to go out and enjoy your friends and have a social life. I mean, community is so important. What I do is I see if they have a bottled sparkling water, and I really like it. I don't need flavoring in it.
Yeah.
Um, so I just look for that. And if it's a place that has like soda water and I might not get it, I might bring my own water bottle in with electrolytes. Um, I've also been known to bring my own reverse osmosis sparkling water in my Yeti, and it's just water.
Yeah. Perfect. Perfect. I don't know if you heard that story of Raj when he was coming to the event in Dallas. He had somebody saw him at the airport and he was traveling with his Berkey. Like the whole.
I traveled with a clearly filtered pitcher.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
It matters. It may seem extreme, but we're dealing with a very serious disease, and we really want to get to the point where we are managing the disease and living happily with it. You could be with it right now, you don't, but you expect that at some point you could start it again, and so you're using it. You're looking at it as a manageable disease.
It is a manageable disease, and that's also the thing. Like the fear that one day it could come back keeps me honest. I have not cheated once on my ketogenic diet, not even once,
Wow.
since February of 2023. And partially it's because you can make amazing food, and also even treats, keto treats. If you need a birthday celebration, my husband's birthday was this week. I made him beautiful little keto custards, and they were delicious. I don't miss the junk.
I know. I think that it's hard to believe, especially like, like I used to be a gluten lover, right? Like I always thought the hardest thing for me was going to be getting rid of tortillas. Love tortillas. I was like, there is no way I can get rid of tortillas. And now the thought of a flour, like eating like flour with no flavor, because once you start making keto food, it's so flavorful. It's so rich, sweet, savory, whatever part of your meal you're making. It's so good that you really realize that processed stuff doesn't taste good. When you start putting real food in your mouth and you start really tasting that, you're like, that other stuff tastes terrible.
Yeah, and it's amazing to me how your palate changes. I mean, because I don't eat the processed crap. You know, the things like the sweetness of a tomato, it is divine to me. It's like candy.
Yeah.
So that would probably not have tasted like that prior to my palate changing on this diet, but now I, savor every little flavor.
I'm that way with cucumbers, and then like take the cucumber and dip it into some pink Himalayan salt. I could eat that all day. So good.
Yes, I've been making homemade ranch mayonnaise and dipping cucumbers into that.
Me too. I love it. We'll have to see if our recipes are the same. That's amazing. So, you tell somebody who is listening to this who's just newly diagnosed?
Yeah. First of all, breathe. We have this tendency to find out about something bad about our health and then immediately be like, we have to do something now. Breathe. You want to do the right things. You don't want to just jump to the first doctor that's presented to you. You want to evaluate your options. Had I gone with that doctor in Maine, I probably wouldn't be very happy, and he would have pushed me into some things that I don't want to do.
Yeah.
And so make sure that the people you choose for your team are people that resonate with you, that you like their style, that you like working with them, because you need to lean on them.
Yeah.
And, having somebody who knows what they're doing, having a doctor that, in cancer, we do need to have doctors that focus on the tumor, but we also need to have doctors that focus on the rest of you. I mean, our bodies are systems, and cancer doesn't grow just in one location and the rest of you fine. No, that's not how it works. You need somebody to help you address your entire system. That is my biggest piece of advice. And it's honestly the thing that I see go wrong more often than I'd like to see.
Yeah.
And I'm forever telling people, please get a qualified oncology trained integrative doctor to help you work out the things that we find in your terrain.
Metabolically trained, a metabolic oncologist.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm sure you've heard this a million times because I have. I have the best oncologist out there. And there are so many brilliant oncologists out there, but an oncologist is a tumor specialist. They are cancer specialists. They aren't whole body metabolic specialists. And just to clarify for anybody who's like, what is this metabolic? Metabolic is our cells. We have billions of cells, and they have mitochondria in them, and that is our metabolic function. And that metabolic function is what breaks down that leads us to developing cancer. And so when we just focus on the tumor that's in the brain, and we don't focus on all of the cells and all of the metabolic function, we're missing a key component of it. We're missing the root cause.
Absolutely. The other thing that comes to mind that I would tell someone is test first. Don't just take, all of the treatments that somebody else is doing or all the supplements that somebody else is doing. Test. You need to do extensive testing. And that's where the terrain, doctors, the metabolic doctors really come in handy, is they can help you evaluate what is actually broken before you start throwing darts that you don't know where they're going or what they're actually fixing.
Yeah.
This is a conversation I have a lot. And, everyone wants to do all of the things to make themselves better, but we got to know what we have to fix first.
Mm-hmm. So true. So true. Andrea, thank you so much for sharing your story. Getting this out there is so critically important. And it's also, you have to be very vulnerable to do this. And I also want to say that sometimes there's shame that comes with cancer. And, being able to share your story is being able to say, that I have no shame, and I'm willing to share my story. Did shame play a part in your cancer diagnosis?
In my diagnosis, I don't know that it in the diagnosis exactly. I, definitely knew that, for example, that first year in Maine, that I was not being as kind to my body. And as a nutritionist, that maybe there was some shame associated with that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the thing is sometimes we get into patterns that aren't healthy. And the number one thing you can do is recognize it and then make the changes necessary.
Yeah.
And this diagnosis allowed me to do that. And that is something I'm really grateful for, because I know that cancer made me a healthier person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely did.
And I bring up the shame part because of your field, but also because oftentimes people don't talk about their cancer diagnosis. A lot of people hide it. They hide it from their friends and family. And a lot of time it is because they felt that they did something wrong. And what I would really like to impart is that we all live in a modern society. And we are all surrounded by things that are around us that we can see, and some that we can't, and a lot that we can't see. There's a lot of environmental factors that have nothing to do with choices that we've made. And then there are just everyday living that affects us. We know when we go out to eat, well, maybe it may not be the best food, but come on, I want to live, and I'm working, and I'm social, and I have these things. And the minute that we can start to put shame to the side and really focus on really get this message out there, it's just such a huge part of not just us individually healing, but us healing as a society. Because, we really need to give people hope, get this message out there. And I know that, publicly telling your story is not the easiest thing. And I just really appreciate you being willing to do that.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. And, when I last met with Dr. Smith, what I told him was cancer is one of the best things that's ever happened to me, because I needed an excuse to put my health first. It has to be first.
Yeah.
And I didn't have it as first before, but now I do. And look at what it's done to me. It's completely radically changed my health, my life, my home, all of it.
Wow.
And I'm happier than I ever was.
Wow.
Maybe it's all those good fats.
Yeah. Good tasty fats. Okay, so one last question before we hang up. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your quality of life before your diagnosis, and then your quality of life after your diagnosis?
My quality of life was okay before. I would say probably 6 or 7. I had a lot of stress in my life. And now I would say it's probably a 9 or 10.
Wow.
Like, things have really shifted. I, am prioritizing, getting that stress out of my life and eating only things that I'm okay with eating and advocating for myself. It's really empowering to advocate for yourself. I think it gives you a new sense of strength. It's very important, and I feel happy that I know what to do. I've got the right people on my team to, give me advice when I need it, and it's empowering. It's great.
That is so good to hear. Well, thank you so much, and we will be talking to you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Cindy.